Gewaltig. Sagt der Heilige Mishnah on Daf Zayin Amar Aleph. Mi shenigmar dinai. Someone had gemar din, and he was condemned to a chiyuv of misa. Ubarach, but he ran away. Uvaluf ne'oisa best, and then he was brought back to that best. So the question now is, do they re-adjudicate, or they just go straight to misa because they've already passed him? So the halach is ein soishu nestinai. If he went back to the same bezdin, they don't try it again. As Rashi says, lachsor v'lisa v'litain ula yizak. You don't try to start again. He was condemned to go straight to misa. Kol mokim sheyamdu shnayim. Whenever two Eidim come to Besin, the Yomru, and they'll say Eidus, Me'idin onu bishploini, we could say Eidus on this person, Shenigmar dinai bevezdin shal ploini. They already condemned him in Bezdin X, uploini Eidov, and these are the two people that were the Eidim that led to his Gemardin. Hareze Yeharik. No matter what Bezdin it is, they don't retry the case. They accept the verdict of the other best. Zokti Mishnah weiter, Sanhedrin, the mitzvah to make Sanhedrins. So Zokti Gemara, Zokti Mishnah Neheges Ba'aretz of Chutz. They were in Eretz Yisrael and in Chutz. Sanhedrin Hareges Achas B'Shavua. If a Sanhedrin kills once in 7 years, Nikus Chavlanis. That's called a bezin that kills too much. So they should be killing less than once in 7 years. It's once in 70 years. But once in 70 years is chavlanis, or once in 70 years is normal. That's what the Gemara is going to ask. Rabbi Kiva said, if we would have been on the Sanhedrin, we never would have killed anybody. As Rashi says, if we would have lived in a period where the Sanhedrin were still passing on dinin nefashos, no one would have ever gotten killed. As Gemara will explain, how would they do that? They would ask the Eidim questions that they couldn't answer. Correct. And that would trip them up. Zok to Gemara. So you know what Rabbi Shimon Gamliel answered back? Groise Knacker. You're so fine in Erlich. You're going to destroy civilization. You're like the liberal government that has bail reform. The best way to increase crime is not to punish crime harshly. So you're not doing the world a favor. You're just causing corruption in the world. Zok to Heilige Gemara. Lefnei Oishe Bezdin, Hu Dein Soishu. The Lashon Mishnah is Mishanik Medina Uvarach Ubal Lefnei Oishe Bezdin Ein Soishnas Dinai. So it's mashma if they would go to a different Bezdin, maybe a Bezdin, the second Bezdin will second guess the first Bezdin. Halafnei Bezdin Acher Soishrin. But the problem is Atani Seifa. The Seifa of our Mishnah says not like that. Kalmokam Shiamdu Shnayim v'Yomer Me'idin Anu Es Ish Ploni Shenigmar Dinai Bevezdin Ploni Uploni Edov Harei Neherag. In fact, even another Bezdin cannot second guess the first Bezdin. So it sounds from the ratio like a second Bezdin could second guess the first Bezdin, and from the Seif it says not. It all depends. If his original din Torah wasn't Chutz La'aretz, and then he ran to Eretz Yisrael, and that's where he was reported as being Mechuyev Misa, they will try the case again. Because in Eretz Yisrael, sometimes we could find a schus, as the Gemara says, the Tanya Rabbi Yehuda ben Destoy Omer, Mishum Rabbi Shimon ben Shedach, Borach me'aretz l'chutz la'aretz, ain't soishnas dinai. There's no way in chutz la'aretz will they find a schus if in Eretz Yisrael they couldn't. But in chutz la'aretz, soishnas dinai, they reverse it in and they try it again. If they zechus l'shal Eretz Yisrael, as Rashi says, Ulai toyel limtzalei pasach shal schus. The schus of Eretz Yisrael might find some way to save this person's life. Gewaltig. Zok the heilige Gemara weiter. Sanhedrin Noyeges. So what did the Mishnah tell us? That Sanhedrin is Noyeg, the Eretz Yisrael and Chutz La'aretz. How do we know that Sanhedrin is noig even chutzlars. The Tanur Rabbanon, while you eila lachem luchugas mishpat l'dorisechem. But the Gemara didn't quote all pasuk. If we look in the Torah Ara Shalom, it says vayu eila lachem luchugas mishpat l'dorisechem bechol moishveiseichem. Wherever you might live, even in chutzlaretz, there's a chiyuv to establish a best. Lamadnu l'sanhedrin shenehegis baritz u'bechutzlaretz. Fragt Gemara im kein mate mit loymar shoyftim v'shoytrim titan lecha v'chol sharecha. It says sharecha meaning in your gates, meaning in Eretz Yisrael, but not in Chutz La'aretz. V'sharecha at the Moshe b'teidinim, and for the Gemara, v'sharecha at the Moshe b'teidinim v'chol plach u'plach u'b'chol ir v'ir. Not only does every province need a bezdin, but every city needs a bezdin. Chutz La'aretz at the Moshe v'chol plach u'plach. Every province requires a bezdin, or every state, v'yat the Moshe v'chol ir v'ir, but not every city requires a local bezdin. Zok the Heilige Gemara weiter, Sanhedrin Hayreges, once in 70 years is what? Rabbi Elazar said, once in 70 years. So the question is, what does that mean? That's also called a chavlanis. The normal is once in 70 years, and more frequently than that is a chavlanis. Take the Gemara blabs besop. Rabbi Tarfon, Rabbi Kiva, Omer Elohinu. Frag the Gemara, Heichi Havu Avdi. It can't be a scam. There has to be a legitimate way in which they would disqualify the Edom. So what would they do? They would ask the following question. Are you sure that the victim was a shalom? Maybe he was a treifa. If they don't know, if they're not sure, they're rejected. Even if you're going to say he looked to be completely healthy, Dilma b'mokim sayif nekev hava. Maybe exactly where you cut him, there was a hole, so he was a treifa. Even if we make an autopsy, we would never know that. So therefore, how could you be so sure that he wasn't already a treifa, the victim wasn't already a treifa? What about in the case of boilus erva? There's many reasons why someone's a mechuyev misa. What about a boilus erva? So hechi avdi, abayev rav dami tabayu, they would ask the edom, where isam kemichal b'shveferes. Did you actually see his aver go into her isam mokum? That's not the norm to see that. So therefore, they wouldn't be able to kill this person for niyaf based on their ethos. Rabbanan hechidani, the Rabbanan who do condemn someone lemisa. How do they do it? We never have Edom that say they saw Michal b'Shveferes. They don't have to actually see his aver go in. They just have to see that they're together in such a way that would indicate that what they're doing is not the right thing. As Rashi says, Mishayanhagu inyan niyov sheshaychvin b'kir basar. They're lying together, v'noihagin kederech tashmish, and they're acting in such a fashion. Okay, so let's have a quick look at Tosfos. Being that we don't have such a long daf, let's take a little bit of a nash in Tosfos. Dilma b'mokim sayif nekav havo. Kashel Rebbeyotam. Rebbeyotam has a problem. Tamrim perkam b'dechulin. And we learn that episode. The loy chayshinon laha dazlina basaruba. It's mashma that you're not choishes to roiv, because roiv people don't have a hole in mokoim hasayim. And if you went by roiv, you should easily be able to condemn this murderer. The vadai. Look at the base. The vadai, if you don't ask them, then loy chashi. You don't have to ask. Normally, you wouldn't have to ask. You can rely on the roiv that this person was not a treifa. You don't ask. But if you ask, if you probe, then it's a problem. I'm skipping the bracket. Shim yoimru the lo yadinon. What if they say we're not sure? Then yibatla edis. It'll be batalatis. Now, where do you see such a concept? If it was a question of what the murder victim was, what the murder weapon was, the Eli Shalinon Kayat. If they don't ask the Adam what the murder victim was, so then there's no problem if one thought one way, one thought the other way, because they're never asked. But v'ze'amer b'sayif, v'ze'amer b'arion, then in Tanakh, then you say the Adam are not consistent. So sometimes, if you don't ask, it won't be a problem. But if you ask, and that invokes to say there's an inconsistency, that will ruin the edus. Avagav the b'sayif haririn Amru ein yoidin hareis anachin. What if they say they didn't know? That would be a good edus. But to the problem is, we just had in Tosfos that even if we asked the Adam, was this man a treifa anyway? If they say I don't know, you reject their edus. But if they don't know the murder weapon, you don't reject it. Why would you reject it for this question and not for that question? Zokt the Tosfos zegarua. It's worse to say I don't know about whether or not he's treifa. It's something about the actual victim they don't know. But the weapon is a little bit external to the victim. There, if they weren't sure, they didn't know, it wouldn't rude this. For Zok Tosfos, I don't like this pshat. So who did Tosfos quote this pshat from? I guess from the Rebbeinu Tam. I don't like this pshat. Because it's logically difficult to accept. For what reason is it? If you don't ask them, then we'll say it's chayiv, and we'll say that we have enough clarity that this murder victim was a chayiv, was not a treifa. But if they merely say they don't know, potter. So that's difficult to understand. And the raya that he brought from Seifer and the Riven, where depending on the answer, it would indicate whether or not this is considered an inconsistency. The husband called Kamad Lo Shalina Lahu, as long as you don't ask them, we have no reason to assume that they're going to contradict each other. So there I understand if you didn't ask them, it wouldn't be a problem. Because why would you assume they're going to contradict? Then it's doim sheker. It's not unusual for people to remember their murder victim. It's a pretty important part of their story. They might not remember the clothing that the victim or perpetrator were wearing, but they would likely remember the murder weapon. But Rebbeinu Tam's pshat is very difficult to understand. If you don't ask them, and we don't know if he killed a treif or a shalom chayiv, you'll be chayiv. They didn't contradict. They just said we don't know. Potter. It's very hard to accept that would potter them. L'chein is another pshat. The hadika amar loy nerag adam me'olam. That Rabbi Kiva said, if we would have been the bezin, no one would have ever been killed. Lav dafka. It doesn't mean no one would have ever been killed, and we would always have a way to disqualify. It just means we would have had so many ways to save the victim, but not that they would never be a victim. Since I would make sure to ask a lot of questions. It's likely to happen that there will be some type of inconsistency that would arise. Don't say that Rabbi Kiva is chayish lamuta, and that's why he wouldn't kill him, because he's chayish lamuta that maybe this person was a treifa. There's no one who's chayish lamuta more than Reb Meir, and even Reb Meir would be moida. Even Reb Meir is moida that if you can't clarify, that you couldn't clarify, you're not chayish lamuta and per kamen. The equal may come a little milsa. There is a case where it would be inevitable that there'd be chiv misa if there was a kruma moyach, that the person was killed based on a kruma moyach that he punctured, and we checked it before to make sure that it was undamaged. So the next thing was on the violation of znus, they would also ask him, "Did you seek a mikol b'sheferes?" But Frank Toshus, what about the Aveir Avodah Zarah? How could they disqualify Adam that say someone who's Aveir Avodah Zarah? What are they going to ask there that would disqualify? So Frank Toshus, avoid Avodah Zarah or Mechal Shabbos, Ma'ikal Meimer. How are you going to disqualify the Adam there? The H's that we used here, maybe the guy was a treifa, maybe the victim was a treifa. Did you see it? That doesn't matter. What do you mean nobody would have been killed? B'chal Shabbos, Avodah Zarah would have been killed. Lahaya adam nerg mishum de l'shchichli kulahai kim biritzeach v'rayis. Avodah zarah isn't that common. Chol Shabbos isn't that common. The most common reasons that people do averis that come to chiv misa are ritzicha on the rise. They could have asked him, maybe the violator is a treifa. The violator is a treifa, you can't say this on him. You know why? The mu treifa, if you're going to be mazim the edim that said that he was over in Avera, lo yiyu chayovin misa. They won't be chayav misa. You know what? He was a dead man. He was a treif anyway. So we're edish yet yochalazima, v'avla edish yet yochalazima, and therefore you will not be mechayiv. Gewaltig. Zok der heilige Gemara weiter. Hadron alach b'lineder, hadron alach chetzeredim, b'lineder hadron alach chetzeredim, b'lineder hadron alach chetzeredim. Zok der heilige Mishnah, the first Mishnah, the second paragraph. The following are the list of people that go with the goals. Hahirig nefesh b'shkod. One who kills a person b'shagi. Now, the way they used to build the roofs, Rashi explains, is the construction, the beams were built flat, but you still needed a sloped roof because if the roof surface was flat, water would pool there and it would leak. So out of the tar, they would raise the tar, they would put a thicker layer of tar towards the center of the roof, and then as the roof gets towards the edge, they would thin out the tar, so there was a slope built out of the tar. So I said the center of the roof, which means it would slope down on either side of the point. Huadin, on one side of the roof, they could have put more tar and there was one long slope. So the way they used to smooth out the tar in such a way to get that thicker layer on one side and the thinner layer on the other side is the person would stand with a long piece of 2x4, similar to what you see the people who do concrete, they use the big 2x4s to smooth out the concrete. They would do that, and they would stand on the roof at the point where they want the tar to be the thickest, and they would take the tar on the roof, push it forward towards where it needs to get thinner, and then pull it back towards where it needs to be thicker. Now, what happens if a guy drops that board? So he was moving this 2x4 back and forth in order to control or set the thickness of the tar. Now, magal means as you're pulling it towards you. So this board is not derech yirida, this board is derech aliyah, you're pulling it toward you to the higher thing. For Gosin, it killed somebody. Or haya mishalshal b'chavis. I'm sorry, I apologize. Magal b'magila is pushing down. So it's derech yirida. But nafla vergosa, haya mishalshal b'chavis. You're lowering a chavis down with a rope, and the barrel fell on somebody. V'nafla vergosa. Notice it doesn't say that the rope snapped. It says you couldn't hold on anymore, right? Or how you yored besulam, or someone who's coming down on a ladder and slips. When nafal of argosa and fell on the victim and killed him. Hareza goyla, because that's derech yirida. Avalim haya moishech b'magila, but if he was pulling it towards him, that means the board is on its way up. V'nafal of argosa, or haya doyla b'chavis, he's pulling the barrel up from the water. Only here does it say that the rope tear. Or turning on to Amid Bays. He's on his way climbing up the ladder. Then he does not go into Golas. If it's on the way down, he goes to Golas. But if it's on the way up, if it's not B'derech Yerida, Einay Goyla. The Gemara is going to bring a pasuk. It's not as far. Now, the Gemara is going to ask soon. The Mishnah is kol shebederech yiridasai, so it's obviously trying to be married something. Now, once the Mishnah says kol shebederech yiridasai goyla, the Mishnah could stop right there. I obviously know that if it's not derech yirida, ain't goyla. The Gemara is also going to want to know what the extra chiddush we learn from the shaloi bederech yiridasai ain't goyla. Zog to Gemara. Mino hanamili. How do we know this halacha? That it's only derech yirida where you're chayav golos, so not derech aliyah. Amar Shmuel d'Amar Krav vayapel Allah vayavayis ad sheyipol derech nefila. So the pasuk says, "Oy b'chol even asher yamas ba beloy ra'is." He didn't want to do it. Vayapel Allah, it fell on him. Vayamais, and it killed him. V'loy oyev loy v'loy mevakesh ra'asai, So from there we learn that only derech Yerida is derech Chiyuv. Tanur Rabbanan. Now we're darshaning these psukim, so I'm going to have my finger on the place in the Gemara and my pointer in the psukim. It says in the pasuk, "V'hikrisem lachem orim, orei miklat tihiyana lachem." You should have orei miklat. V'noshama retzayach makei nefesh bishkoga. So we learn bishkoga prat lemezid. Dafka if someone killed b'shogig, but if someone killed b'mezid, he doesn't go into galus. Bivlidas, the next pasuk says, "Livnei Yisrael v'lager v'lasoyshav v'soycham tiyena sheishar meila lemiklot lo neshama kol makei nefesh bishkoga." I read that pasuk already. The next pasuk says, "V'zed var etzeach asher yon neshama v'choy asher yakesh re'eu bivlidas." So bivlidas prat limischaven. So frank Gemara, mezid. You said bishkoga prat lemezid. Mezid pshita. I don't need a pasuk to tell you that mezid doesn't go into galus. Barkatalu. We already have a different pasuk saying that b'mezid is chayiv misa. Amarava ema prat la'omer muter. You know what type of mezid we're talking about? He did it b'mezid. He killed b'mezid, but he didn't know that there's an isur etzicha. So Amar Abba Amalei Abaye. He omer muter onasu. Omer muter is anointis. He had no idea that this was us. Right? He had no idea that there's such an issue. Omer lei zokabay, shani omer muter karv l'mezid. Omer muter is karv l'mezid. Now, no one says over here, I swear on the daf, what it is. But I know that there's a rule in secular law, ignorance of the law is not an excuse. You can't say, I didn't know that you can't speed. Or you can't even say, I didn't know that the speed limit was lower here. Your responsibility to know the law. So there's a svar to say, omer muter is karv l'mezid. Bivlidas, the pasuk is bivlidas. We said earlier, prat the mischaben. Prat the more mischaben once again is amazing. Mischaben pshita bar katolahu. Amarabe, what we mean is prat the mischaben l'harigas abahema, l'harigas adam, or l'kuti, l'harigas Yisrael, or l'nefel l'harigas ben kayama. You have the kavanah to kill the person that you're actually killing in order to be chayiv misa. But in mischaben is not chayiv misa, but it doesn't go into golos either. So there is a type of rotzkim that don't get a chiv misa, but don't get the kapara of golos either. Tanur Rabbanan, im bepesa. Again, we're darshaning another pasuk that talks about shogeg. So it says over here in the pasuk, it says in the pasuk in Dalit, v'im bepesa below eva hadafa. So we're darshaning v'im bepesa means prat lekeren zovis. Rashi says, if you're walking down the street and someone's coming towards you, so there you sort of see, you should have seen him. So that's not called shogi. If by mistake you kill him, that's already karvel measure. You won't go to golos. I apologize. If you're coming connected him and you didn't notice him and suddenly you kill him, that is shogi. But what if you're walking with your knife and you're turning a corner and someone's coming from the other side and you kill him with your knife? That's not a shogi. That's too close to Mason. Because you shouldn't be turning a corner with a sharp knife in your hand. That's mamish what Rashi says. You're making a turn, you're going into the unknown, it's incumbent on you not to have a deadly weapon that's going to encounter anybody or that's going to cut anybody that you're going to encounter. So Prat, Lekeren, Zovis, there you wouldn't have the kapara of golos. The pasuk also says, Veloy Eva. Prat l'soine. A soine, if you killed even b'shogi, someone who you hate, you don't go into golos. Because we could never really say you didn't have any inkling will to do it. Then it says hadafai, right? Hadafai means shadachvai begufai. In order to be chayiv golos, you have to actually come into physical contact. I'm sorry. Right, you hit him, you hit his gofa was below b'chavim, or hishlich olav, or you threw something on him. Again, lahavi yerida shehid tzarich aliyah. What if it's on the way down, but it's l'tzarich aliyah? For instance, you're trying to swing up at something high. So when you wind up for the swing, you go down and up. So is that called derech yerida, and therefore you're going to be chayav for it, or is that called derech aliyah? Because you're only swinging down because you're trying to wind up for the swing up. So will also be chayiv golos. But Lloyd Sidia, you didn't ambush, you weren't hunting this fellow. If you were trying to shoot to the east and you messed up your shot and somehow shot to the west and someone got killed, that's not something that you'd be chayav golos for. Then the next pasuk says, "V'asher loy tzida," you weren't hunting him. What happened if you wanted to shoot your arrow 2 amas and it went further than you expected and somebody was there and you killed him? That you would not go into golos. That you would not go into golos for. Pasuk says it hit somebody, you killed somebody. Where was this person located? In the forest. Why is it relevant for the Torah to tell us where this occurred? Because that's a very important piece of information to the Gemara. My yar is just the nizik the mazik. The yar is a public space. The nizik and the mazik both had rishus to be there. Likon sham to go there. Avkol rishus the nizik the mazik likon sham. But what if someone comes into my property and I kill him by mistake? I don't go into those. What about if someone was climbing up a ladder? And when he stepped on a ladder, when he stepped on this ladder, on this rung, on his way up, the rung slipped out or broke and he fell down. So is that called aliyah or yerida? His body's going up. But when he stepped on that rung, everything's going down. So v'nishmar ashliva mitachta v'nafel v'argamau. Ki agavna, do we say it's aliyah or yerida? Omer lei. So Rabbi Yochanan answered, Kfar nagata b'yerida sheitzoyer aliyah. That would be a yerida sheitzoyer aliyah, which we said is going to be chayav golos. Zaklal, our Mishnah. Kol with the riboy. Shebederech yiridasei goyla. Shaloi bederech yiridasei einelei. So shaloi bederech yiridasei lasuyimai. It can't be pashup shot because we know only derech yirida is goyla. So why did the Mishnah say shaloi bederech yirida is einelei goyla? Lasuyimai lav lasik hagavna. Maybe to tell you this case. What's the case of shaloi bederech yirida? When you're climbing on a ladder, even though the rung's going down, that's not called derech yirida. Maybe that's what the Mishnah is trying to tell us, that the person doesn't go into golos. Zok to Gemara ulatemeich. If that's how you're going to learn, well, then we need to know what the kol shebederech yirida is teaching us. L'suyimai. Maybe that's l'suyay that it's chayiv, right? Mechanesh you're memayed from the shaloi b'derech yirida, and maybe b'marbed from kol shebederech yirida. Right? Ella, you know what it's talking about? Kol is l'suyay katzav. And to tell you the halach of a butcher. What is this katzav? The Tanya we looked at a brayso. Katzav shein mekatzev. A katzev that was chopping meat. Now sometimes he does it on the upswing, and sometimes he does it on the downswing. So we have 4 braysos that are all contradictory, or at first seemingly contradictory to each other. If he chopped something in front of him and he killed by mistake, he'll be chayiv. But if he did it behind him, he'll be potter. V'tanya idich bein lefanav bein acharav chayiv. V'tanya idich bein lefanav bein acharav potter. But like Kasha, it's not contradictory. Each case has its own nuance. Can be reader shalafanav v'ali shalacharav. What happens if you're swinging down because you want to hit something behind you, right? So in such a case, you'll say that you're chayiv for the lefanav and you're potter for the lacharav. So what's the first brayso? The first brayso says, by katziv, the fun of chayiv la'achar potter, because on the downswing is chayiv, on the upswing is potter. Kan beli shalafanav v'yirida shalacharav, so then the la'acharav will be chayiv. Kan be yirida shalafanav v'shalacharav, he's on the downswing, side in the front, side in the back. Therefore, he's chayiv in both cases. And kan beli shalafanav v'shalacharav, and therefore he potter in both cases. So going back to our Mishnah that says kol lo suyimai. Kol is lasuye, kol shabdei chirida. Even if there was an upswing, or even if the downswing is only for the purposes of an upswing, so winding up, you're still chayiv. Let's say that this shaila of someone climbing up a ladder and then he falls down, whether or not that's called derech chirida or not, whether or not he's going to go for that, let's suggest that this is a machlokas tonight, because the Mishnah says as follows: someone who's climbing up a ladder. And a rung slipped out from underneath. So wouldn't it make sense to say that's exactly our shaila? So So I have many other ways to explain these brises where everybody would agree to the brise that it says chayiv, and everybody would agree to the brise that says but. Everybody could hold this in aliyah. I'm sorry. So everybody holds that it will be potter. V'loy kasha. Kan l'nezikin, kan l'golos. The brise that it says you're potter is talking about golos. L'gabi golos is derech aliyah. But the government is okay. If you just damage the guy, adam would loyal. We don't care how it occurred. You'd be chayiv anyway. So that could be one discrepancy in the brise. So everybody would hold that it's derech aliyah, and it's only for nezikin that we're mechayivim. Ibay say mahava all the golos. They're both the golos. So v'loy kasha ha de isliya. If the step was wormy, so the step was always on its way down. So therefore, it's derech cherida. Ha de lo isliya. If you stepped on a strong rung, which really means you're going up, and then it went down, that's going to be derech aliyah. Ibay say mahava lo isliya. It's talking about a strong rung that didn't get weak and sag. Like kasha ha de mahada kay loy mahada. If the rung is securely in place and it's not going to budge, then we call it derech aliyah. But if it was a weak rung that was going to fall, that's called derech aliyah. Now we get into if someone's axe kills somebody. So there's really two ways an axe can kill somebody. You could swing with your axe to chop a tree, and the metal of the axe could come loose from the handle and fly into the air and kill somebody. That's one case. Another case is you hit the wood, and then a chip flies out of the wood and kills somebody. The question is, what is the Torah talking about when the Torah says, in this scenario, there'll be a chiv galus? So Zokta Mishnah, Nishbat habarzal mikita. The metal, the handle of the axe, or the metal of the axe, the blade of the axe, dislodged from the handle, bargain killed. Rabbi Yomer, Rabbi Yomer, that's, you don't go into galus there, but mina etam ispakeya. What if the axe stayed together, and when you hit the wood, a piece of wood went flying, and that killed the victim? There is the opposite. Rabbi Yomer goyla. So clearly there's a machlokes what the scenario that the Torah is painting when the Torah describes the case of galus, what it is referring to. Tanya Amar Lahem Rabbi the Chacham. Rabbi told the Chacham. Doesn't say that the metal fell off from its wood, which would indicate that the blade fell off the handle. But that's not what the pasuk says. So since it doesn't say eitzoi, it means the barzel chipped off a piece from the tree, and the tree went flying. That's why Rabbi says, I learned that that's where the chi of galus comes from. It says eight lamata by our sugya v'noshel barzel min eight. Lamaila says lichor seitz when we're talking about chopping wood down. So let's learn. Ma'etz ha'omer lamaila mina eitz ha'mispakeya af eitz ha'omer lamata mina eitz ha'mispakeya. So Rebbe needs two reasons to justify his position. First of all, for the Kreen Dixiv, and second of all, from a Zereshava, from a Gili Milsa of a pasuk later. Why does he need two reasons? Because the Gemara soon is going to slug up the first reason. They both extract the information that they have shot from the very same pasuk. It's merely a question of how to learn the pasuk. It says, "V'nashal habash al mina eitz." Rabbi Savar yesh em l'Messiris. You go basar the Messiris, which is the way it is written, the ksiva, and it says v'nashal. It says v'nashal. It says it without the aleph, but v'nishal ksiv. The word that it says is v'nishal. V'nishal means that it causes the wood to go flying, and therefore Rabbi learns it's only chayiv if a piece of wood goes flying. For bonds of relation mikra, you go basar how we read it. V'nashal karinan. We read v'nashal. V'nashal means the metal, the blade of the axe went flying. V'Rebbe yesh aim l'Messiris svirle. So we're saying that Rebbe Shita is based on the halacha of yesh aim l'Messiris. That's why Rebbe says that the chiyuv only comes if the wood goes flying. Via Amar. The problem is Rebbe doesn't hold that way because via Amar. I gotta get to the next spot. Via Amar, Rabbi Yitzchak bar Yosef, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Rebbe, Rabbi Yehuda ben Royitz, Uvei Shammai, Rabbi Shimon, Rabbi Kiva, Kulu Svir lo Yesh Emo Mikra. So how could you say the svara for Rebbe is because of Yesh Shem L'Mesiris, we say he has Yesh Shem L'Mikra. That's why we had the B'oid. Rebbe says, it says, Eitz L'mayla, says Eitz L'mata. Just like L'mata, just like L'mayla, it means a piece of wood flying, so the here means a piece of wood flying. So even if you hold Yesh Shem L'Mikra, you could still have a raya from the psukim that the Chiv Misa for Golos comes from the wood goes flying. Amra Papa. Man shot a piece of ladikla. Someone took a clump of earth and threw it at a dekel, at a palm tree, to knock dates down. The Asar Tamari, and he succeeded in knocking down some dates, but the Ozul Tamri v'kotel, this bundle of dates that you knocked down with your clump of earth, landed on somebody and killed somebody. Bonu l'machloikis, the Rebbe v'Rabbanan. It would be a Makos Rebbe v'Rabbanan. According to Rebbe, this is exactly what happens, right? You hit a tree and the tree goes flying and kills somebody, that goes into goals. According to Rabbanan, only the clump of earth is what's going to kill, not the fruit that it knocks down. Pshita, why in the world would I think otherwise? Why do I need you to tell me that this is the machlokes of Rabbi and the Rabbanan? Because maybe even according to Rabbi, it's not called koichai. When you hit piece of wood with an axe, it's all connected. The blade of the axe is connected to your handle. You go bam. It's your koich directly that makes that piece of wood go flying. But here, I threw a clump of earth at the tree, and now the tree goes flying. That's koich. That's not mamish koich. Maybe everybody would agree you don't go into golos. Kamash malon. No, you do go into golos. Kamash malon sharegev kegarzin v'tamorim kekisa manitas. The piece of earth, we look at it, we perceive it like it's the blade of the axe. So what else would be koich koich? I mean, this is really, it's like one ball in pool hitting another ball, making it go, right? So why is this koich? What would be koich koich? Going to shada pisa umach yolagarma. If you threw a piece of clump of earth at the branch, we also garma, and the branch moved because you hit it, and umach yolakavas, and it hit the bundle, the cluster of tamarim, and then vasatarmei v'kotel, that's koich koich. But if you directly hit with your clump of earth the tamarim, that's not called koich koich. That there would be a chiv golus, because it's considered the nashal abazel. Your impact on the dates made the dates go flying and kill somebody. Okay, Baruch Hashem, we were zeicha. We finished Daf Zayin, and Be'ez Hashem tomorrow we will learn Daf Ches.